How does an unarmed pope convince the most feared warlord in history, Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, to turn his armies away from Rome and spare the city? What kind of authority can stand before emperors and barbarian kings without soldiers, without weapons, armed only with moral conviction and the precision of truth? Why did a scholar and administrator become the man who literally saved Western civilization from destruction, not once, but twice? This is the story of Saint Leo the Great, the Pope who proved that the strongest weapon is truth, spoken with courage, and that moral authority can accomplish what armies cannot. When leaders fled and armies failed, why did Rome turn to a single, unarmed man? Watch how Leo's quiet strength shaped history. Tap like and subscribe for more true accounts where conviction defies power. The year was 440, and Rome was dying. Not the sudden death of conquest, but the slow hemorrhage of collapse. Barbarian tribes swept through provinces like wildfire through dry grass. Aqueducts crumbled. Forums emptied. Refugees streamed through the gates, carrying stories of villages razed and cities abandoned. The Western Roman Empire, once master of the world, was fragmenting into chaos. Emperors cowered in fortified Ravenna, their authority evaporating like morning mist. Only one institution remained stable: the Church. Leo had been born in Tuscany around the year 400, raised in an empire already cracking at its foundations. Educated and fluent in Latin and Greek, he entered the church service at a young age. By the time Pope Celestine I made him archdeacon, Leo had become the Pope's right hand, chief administrator, trusted diplomat, the man sent to solve impossible problems. When generals and bishops clashed in Gaul, it was Leo who traveled north to mediate. His reputation preceded him. Brilliant theologian, skilled negotiator, a man whose word carried weight. He was still in Gaul when the news arrived. Celestine had died, and in his absence, the clergy and people of Rome had unanimously elected Leo as pope. He returned to a city on its knees. The marble glory of the Caesars was fading, replaced by the wooden crosses of Christians seeking salvation from a world collapsing around them. Leo knelt in prayer before accepting the burden. He understood what others perhaps did not. He was inheriting not just a church, but a dying civilization that needed more than prayers alone. It needed courage. But before Leo could defend Rome with courage, he had to defend the faith with truth. His first battles were not fought with swords, but with words, against heresies that threatened to tear Christianity apart from within. Manichaeism crept through Rome's streets, teaching that matter was evil and only spirit good. Leo preached against it with vigor, his sermons cutting through confusion with the blade of clarity. Pelagianism denied humanity's need for grace. Leo refuted it, emphasizing that salvation comes not from human effort, but from divine mercy. Yet the greatest crisis came from the East, where debates about Christ himself raged like theological wildfires. Nestorius divided Christ into two persons, human and divine, kept separate, as if Jesus were two beings sharing one body. Eutyches swung to the opposite extreme, claiming Christ's humanity was absorbed into his divinity like a drop of water in the ocean. Both heresies attacked the heart of Christian faith: the Incarnation, the mystery of God becoming man. In 449, the so-called Robber Council of Ephesus sided with Eutyches and silenced orthodox voices. Leo's response was immediate and decisive. He wrote to Flavian, the Patriarch of Constantinople, a theological masterpiece that would echo through the centuries. His tome defined with crystalline precision what the Church believed. Christ is one person with two natures, fully divine and fully human. Without confusion, without change, without division, without separation, Leo wrote. The two natures united perfectly in one person. God and man, heaven and earth, kissing in the mystery of the Incarnation. The tome was sent to a new council called at Chalcedon in 451. When Leo's letter was read aloud to the assembled bishops, silence fell like snow. Then the bishops rose as one voice. Peter has spoken through Leo. The Chalcedonian definition, Orthodox Christology for all time, was built directly on Leo's theological foundation. He had defended the faith with words. Now he would defend his city with courage. The year 452 brought terror to Italy on horseback. Attila the Hun, called the Scourge of God and Destroyer of Nations, had united the Hun tribes into an unstoppable war machine. After his defeat at the Battle of Catalaunian Plains in Gaul failed to break him, he turned his fury south. In the spring of 452, his massive army crossed the Alps and poured into northern Italy like a dark flood. City after city fell. Aquileia, the great fortress city at the head of the Adriatic, was razed to the ground so completely that grass would grow over its ruins. Milan, wealthy and proud, was burned. Pavia became ashes. Survivors who reached Rome brought tales that froze the blood. Entire populations slaughtered or enslaved, churches desecrated, the earth itself scorched black. Rome had no army to defend it. Emperor Valentinian III, weak and incompetent, had fled to Ravenna and cowered behind its marshes. The imperial court offered no leadership, no strategy, only paralyzed fear. The city's walls, once symbols of Roman might, now seemed like thin parchment against the storm approaching from the north. Churches filled with refugees and desperate prayers. Mothers clutched children, elders wept, and young men who had never held weapons wondered if they should die fighting or flee. Everyone remembered 410, when Alaric's Visigoths had sacked Rome, and 455 loomed with rumors of Vandal threats from North Africa. How many times could the Eternal City survive? All eyes turned to Leo. He was no general, commanded no legions, wore no armor, but he possessed something the empire had lost: moral authority. When others asked, "Who will save Rome?" the answer became clear, though impossible. The Pope would have to negotiate with Attila himself. Everyone knew the Hun's reputation. Diplomatic missions to Attila usually ended in death or humiliation. Yet Leo made his decision with the quiet finality of a man who has weighed his soul and found it willing. "I will go," he said. The shepherd would walk unarmed toward the wolf, and the world would hold its breath. In the summer of 452, Leo led a delegation northward to meet Attila. Senator Avienus and Consul Trigetius accompanied him, but everyone understood who truly led this mission. Not political rank, but moral authority guided their steps. They traveled through devastated Italian countryside, smoking ruins, empty villages, and bodies left unburied by roadsides. Each mile revealed fresh evidence of Hun destruction, and each mile made their mission seem more impossible. The meeting was arranged near Mantua, on the banks of the river Mincio in northern Italy. When they arrived, Leo saw Attila's camp spreading across the plain like a city of warriors. Thousands of tents, horses, weapons, glinting in sunlight. The air itself seemed to tremble with barely contained violence. Attila received them in his tent. History records few details of what was said, but we know this: the most feared warrior in the world met an elderly, unarmed bishop. Legend tells that Attila saw behind Leo the figures of two men with drawn swords, Saints Peter and Paul, defending Rome's successor. Whether this vision was real or symbolic, something profound occurred in that tent. Leo spoke not with the voice of political compromise, but with the authority of truth. He did not beg or bargain. He presented the moral argument. Mercy is greater than conquest. Humanity matters more than glory, and some things are sacred even in war. Perhaps he appealed to practical concerns. Plague had broken out in Attila's camp, supply lines stretched thin, and political complications back east demanded attention. Perhaps he offered tribute. Perhaps, as tradition tells, divine intervention made the invisible visible. What we know with certainty is this: Attila withdrew. The man who had never shown mercy, who had built an empire on terror, who seemed unstoppable, turned his armies around and left Italy. Rome was spared. Western civilization, hanging by a thread, survived another day. Leo returned to Rome not as a conquering general, but as a shepherd who had stood between his flock and the wolves. The city erupted in thanksgiving. They had witnessed something beyond politics or military strategy. They had seen moral authority triumph over naked force. But Leo knew the victory was temporary. The world was still collapsing, and there would be other wolves. Three years later, in 455, the wolves returned, this time from the sea. Genseric, king of the Vandals, sailed from North Africa with a fleet carrying thousands of warriors. Unlike Attila, who could be met and persuaded to withdraw, Genseric came with different intentions and different pressures. The murder of Emperor Valentinian III and the chaos of succession had given him both opportunity and justification. He landed at the mouth of the Tiber, and his army marched toward Rome. Again, Leo went forth. Again, he walked unarmed to meet an armed king. But this time, the outcome would be different. He met Genseric at Rome's gates. The Vandal king was no barbarian savage, but a shrewd, calculating ruler who understood power's realities. Leo could not persuade him to withdraw entirely. Genseric had come too far, risked too much, needed the spoils to maintain his own authority. But Leo negotiated what he could: spare the people, prevent indiscriminate slaughter, preserve Rome's churches, and allow inhabitants to survive. For 14 days, the Vandals sacked Rome. They took treasures, including the golden vessels from Jerusalem's temple that Titus had brought to Rome 4 centuries earlier. They took captives. They took wealth beyond measure. But they did not massacre the population. They did not burn the city to the ground. Thousands of lives were saved because one man stood at the gates and negotiated mercy within the bounds of what was possible. When the Vandals sailed away, Rome survived, diminished, wounded, but alive. Leo immediately began the work of healing and rebuilding. He ransomed captives with church funds, organized relief for the devastated, repaired churches, and strengthened the community's shattered spirit. His pastoral letters from this period reveal a shepherd tending wounded sheep with infinite patience and care. Some might call the Vandal sack a failure, contrasting it with Attila's withdrawal. But Leo understood what his critics did not. In a collapsing world, partial success is still success. Saving thousands when you cannot save all is not failure. It is holy realism, the courage to do what you can with what you have. He had learned that authority rooted in truth sometimes achieves miracles, and sometimes achieves what is merely possible. Both are worth the courage required. Leo served as pope for 21 years, from 440 until his death on November 10, 461. Those decades saw him not only confront military threats, but shape the very nature of papal authority itself. He was a prolific writer whose work survived to this day. 96 sermons and 143 letters, each revealing a mind of crystalline clarity and pastoral warmth. He preached on Christmas and Easter, explaining the mysteries of incarnation and resurrection with both theological precision and poetic beauty. He wrote to bishops across Christendom, offering guidance, correcting errors, and building unity. His letters show a man who never separated intellectual rigor from pastoral care. The papacy itself was redefined by Leo's example. Before him, the Bishop of Rome was first among equals, respected but not yet what he would become. Leo articulated and embodied the Petrine ministry, the successor of Peter, not as a political overlord, but as chief shepherd, guardian of truth, servant of the church's unity. His authority came not from armies or wealth, but from moral conviction, theological clarity, and willingness to risk everything for his flock. He fought heresies not with violence, but with argument. He confronted emperors and barbarian kings not with weapons, but with truth. He administered the church not as a tyrant, but as a steward. He became Leo the Great not because he sought greatness, but because he embodied what true authority looks like. Service rooted in truth, power exercised for protection, leadership defined by sacrifice. When he died in 461, Rome mourned a father. The church mourned a teacher. History would recognize what his contemporaries already knew. He had been great not in the manner of Caesar, but in the manner of Christ. In 1754, the church formally declared him a doctor of the church, recognizing that his teachings endure as bright and relevant as when first written. His tome at Chalcedon remains Orthodox Christology's foundation. His model of papacy, though sometimes corrupted by less worthy successors, established an ideal that still judges and inspires. His courage before Attila became legendary precisely because it was true. He proved that the pen is mightier than the sword, but only when wielded by someone willing to walk unarmed into the sword's reach. Today, when force seems to triumph and truth seems weak, when institutions collapse and moral authority appears quaint, St. Leo the Great stands as evidence of a different possibility. He defended civilization not with armies, but with arguments. He saved countless lives not with violence, but with negotiation. He built an enduring legacy, not through conquest, but through clarity. He faced the most feared warriors of his age and walked away alive because he carried something stronger than steel. Truth spoken with courage, mercy offered without compromise, authority rooted in service. The world desperately needs Leo's example now. We need people who will stand unarmed before power and speak truth without flinching. We need leaders who derive authority not from weapons or wealth, but from wisdom and moral conviction. We need shepherds willing to walk toward wolves when the flock is in danger. We need believers who understand that theology matters because how we think about God shapes how we treat humans. Leo teaches us that one person can change history, that moral authority is real and powerful, that courage without weapons is the truest courage, and that sometimes the greatest victories are the lives saved rather than the battles won. He stood at the hinge of history when the ancient world was dying and the medieval world being born, and by his courage and conviction, he shaped what would come after. The shepherd who faced emperors without fear, who defended truth against heresy, who saved Rome through the sheer force of moral authority, he remains forever Leo the Great. And his greatest lesson echoes still. The strongest weapon is truth spoken with courage. For that weapon, no armor has yet been forged that can resist it.